So I didn't intend to make this video or these set of slides, but I was going over the documents I had written for the regimen, the second strategic overview and the strategic document itself. Those two documents I had to read over a couple hours ago and realized that there were quite a few things missing, and also there were some things that I haven't added on that I've learned in the current Charlie War. I think we're in War 4 now. Yeah, I have yet to incorporate and write down all the things that I've learned so far and all the experience I've gained trying to command a regiment. So I figured, rather than trying to re-edit and rewrite those documents, I'm already here recording videos. I might as well just make a video on it. So this is that video. Now, the whole point behind the regiment was to try address the fundamental problems that I laid out in my previous video. And I've listed them out here. It was the player experience, morale, time and manpower, command and control. These were the four big main problems. And the whole regiment is designed around trying to solve these problems, sort of. Uh, I I don't like trying to put things into like problems and solutions because most of the time, especially in a war game, if it's like a actual kind of like war game, we're not talking like a puzzle game where you just move pieces around, like chess, for example. Unlike chess, there rarely is proper solutions to fix problems. It's usually just a trade-off. It's more like a economist approach, really, to a war game that you have to take. There are only trade-offs, no solutions. So the regiment, the Recon Support Company, my regiment, how it was designed and how it was supposed to act, it was an attempt to try address these four problems. And I'm going to go through each one at a time and try walk you through what I've experienced, what I've identified, and what my approach to the game so far has been. So player experience, the first big one. Um, the way that I've sort of come to see as a regiment commander, for the most part, I'm talking about all these problems and the regiment in general from the commander's point of view and the command point of view for the most part. And all the rest of the things that I'm going to be talking about the game, it's from a commander's view. Yeah, basically, that's how it is. So, as the commander of the regiment, the way I see it, your job is actually more similar to a game master in an RPG rather than a military field commander or something like that. Your job is actually more similar to like in Dungeons and Dragons, the role-playing game. Hopefully, you're familiar with the person watching this. If you're familiar with that game, that's one of the best examples, more well known. If not, you're gonna have to look that up. Sorry, but Dungeons and Dragons, the role-playing game, your job as the regiment commander in Foxhole is very close to the job of the game master or the dungeon master in Dungeons and Dragons. See, your job, if you really want to like take it seriously and actually make this kind of plan and strategy that I've laid out work, your job now is to set the play and sort of facilitate the game for the men in your regiment. All right, you don't actually get to play the game. I'm sorry to say that's not. If you want to be like really good and you want to like really follow the strategy that I'm laying out here, you don't actually get to play the game. I'm sorry. I came to this conclusion in the first 3, 4 days as I was running my regiment. I was getting the recruitment done, getting the logistics planned out, doing the logistics, trying to coordinate with other regiments, trying to plan, try to strategize, try to explain all the tactics. Yeah, when you get to that point, you don't actually get to play the game. And if you do your job properly, then everything else falls into place, which is where the fun part is, and that's where I get the pleasure of playing the game. Well, quotation marks playing the game. I play a very different game than how everybody else plays the game as the commander. That's just how it works. So your whole objective, just like the Dungeon Master in Dungeons and Dragons, is to create the player experience. So you've got to make it fun for your guys. Otherwise, they're just not going to play because this game really, in the sense of the war game, open world kind of concept, which I discussed in my very first video, if you try to approach it like Call of Duty or League of Legends, you're just not going to get anywhere and everyone's just going to drop the game. So your job is to facilitate. Your job is actually to make the game within the game, sort of to say. So the Recon Support Company is a partisan regiment. That's how the conventional definition of my regiment would be. It's focused purely on missions which people would consider to be in the partisan category. And there's a good reason why. Because out of all the rest of the roles and missions on the battlefield in Foxhole, reconnaissance and partisan work required the least manpower, which was the biggest problem that we had on Baker. Baker was the first server I ever played on. It was the first war I ever took part in. I took part in 2 wars, actually, the last two, 24 and 25, I believe. And manpower was always the biggest problem. We had all these great ideas and all these wonderful pieces of equipment and vehicles that we had, all the ammunition stocked, but we had nobody to use it. And so far, from what I've seen, this is a very common problem across Charlie as well. On Able, I'm not too sure whether this is really a problem, but I've been hearing some discussion and arguments and debates going around that that too is something that people are beginning to realize or deal with. I'm not too sure, but for the most part, the fundamental problem that dealing with in terms of player experience was you didn't have the manpower to use the kind of things that you made, basically, and therefore the amount of time spent in making it is all wasted. So in trying to facilitate and set the play basically for the members in my regiment to make sure that they're interested and they have fun, reconnaissance and partisan work, that's what the whole one of the reasons why it's the regiment is designed just to focus on that. There are a lot of other reasons why, and I'm going to go through that, and they all also try to address the fundamental problems. But that's one of the big reasons. Now the drawbacks. So, like I said at the beginning, it's all trade-offs at this point. There's no real solutions to any of these problems. The drawback is that now we're limited in what we can and what we can't do. So if someone were to join my regiment, but he wants to do something else like artillery or tanks, then he has to go somewhere else. That's just the way it is. It's a pretty big trade-off. A lot of people would consider, but honestly, looking at how the way the game's going, I don't think so really. Um, yeah, I try to make it clear at the beginning when I get recruits that this is what we're doing and this is how we intend to go with it. If you want to get in on that action, then you can come ahead and join us. And if not, I'm sorry, you have to go somewhere else. And a lot of the recruits, they come into the Discord server, take a look for like 5 seconds, and then they just leave. I'm pretty sure that's one of the reasons why. But yeah, that's just the nature of how the strategy operates. Yeah. So I've brought up the winning aspect of games quite a few times, and I think each time I tried to address this, it didn't come across right. Every time I reviewed it, it always sounded a little bit wrong, and that there was something that was off really. So I'm just gonna give the background and try to reassess and try to come up with a better way of explaining it. Really, the first time that this idea popped into my head was the very first operation I ever took part of. It was actually a nuke op. Now, at that point in time, I had only been playing logistics. I was a pure logic player for a whole week. I hadn't even been in a firefight. And the first operation that I took part in was a nuke op. And I wasn't just the guy that was standing in the launch site to punch in the codes. I ended up being the lead scout and also the only one of only two people to get the launch codes. I ended up being the spotter to launch the nuke. For a rookie that only played 7 days without even getting a firefight, that was a lot of work. I'm not gonna lie. I played, I think, like a full 7 hours straight on that day, trying to get all the things done. And yeah, we failed to launch the nuke, and there was a whole other operation going on simultaneously that all just completely failed and collapsed. This was Baker 24, I believe. Um, what I said then is what I'm going to try to explain now is that in a game like Foxhole, when you're trying to get these many people to go do something, you have to understand that these people are taking time out of their days to play this game, right? There are people with jobs, there are people with school, and when they come back from work, they don't want to work a second job, right? coming here to have fun. And they also kind of expect something out of the game and out of the regiment itself as well. The reason that nuke op failed is because, well, it was poorly planned. The whole thing was shot from start to finish because there was not much thought put into it, like at all. The logistics wasn't in place, the planning wasn't in place, reconnaissance and intelligence wasn't in place. And for a nuke op, you really do need all those factors in. There are a lot of other smaller operations you can pull off in Foxhole without that, but for a nuke op, you need support elements and you need things done before you even attempt it, and we didn't have any of that. And what I said there then basically was along the lines that losing isn't a problem. I mean, at this point, everybody probably understands that losing is going to happen. Nobody's guaranteed to win. That's what I usually say. But what you can guarantee is that you tried to win, right? Uh, it's the reasons of losing that really get people. If we lost because we got outplayed, people can usually accept that fact and move on. And they usually, in other games, come back and still play the game because they're having fun playing the game and it doesn't mind that they're losing, they're there to learn. In operations and offensives in Foxhole that fail, you can always identify and figure out where it went wrong. And it usually is because of poor leadership or poor strategy or poor planning. All right. It's because it was not well thought out for. People just decided to get as many people together, as much stuff into this one spot, and then just hope that something works out. And in a specialized operation like a nuke op, or in any other kind of like specialized operation where people want to flank or tap or blitz through the enemy lines, and they get like 15 to 30 people on board, and then it all just goes to shit. There's a reason why, because nobody really planned it through. The work wasn't put in. Most of the time is that you have to put at least 3 times the amount of time in planning and preparing the operation than actually playing the operation. That's the sort of baseline rule of thumb that I've come to understand when playing war games. For example, one of the ops that I ran, I probably spent 6 hours beforehand setting up an op that only lasted 30 minutes. But the 30 minutes was, it was a successful op. It was one of the most successful ops I ever pulled off. Yeah, that's the kind of ratio of time to the ratio in terms of time, planning, preparation to combat, and then result in success. And I guarantee you that even if we had failed, I don't think anybody would have been too disappointed with that op. I'm pretty sure everyone had fun. So yeah, that's the morale aspect with the successive defeats that I've always brought up. Hopefully that clarifies things. The 2 other points here, the burnout, demoralization, that's related more these days with the logistics and facilities, which I'm going to get to in the next slide. The poor leadership, as I said before, need to take time, preparation, and planning. And as in the previous slide, as I said, if you're the regiment commander, you got to accept the fact you're not going to play the game as you saw it and marketed it, how you got into it. If you want to be the regiment commander, sacrifices have to be made in order for it to be successful.